Those eyes disguise our height. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. I am your host, Matthew M., and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome back, everybody. We are on episode 12 of the Clean and Filthy podcast. Huge thank you to everybody who's been supporting us, been liking us, commenting, sharing, subscribing. Love each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And if you're here for the first time, stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. We are here every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time, right here on YouTube with a live stream, with episodes available for download wherever you consume your podcast later on that day. Again, thank you all for the downloads, the new subscribers I know we've been getting. I love each and every one of you. As I said last week, I love watching the numbers, checking out where the downloads are coming from. It's so exciting for me, and none of this would be possible without any of you. So thank you all so much. Before we go any further, got to give a shout out to our episode sponsor. It is Etc. by Emily. All of the information for her is listed in. We have to give a big thank you to our episode music, our theme music. It is allowed and been bestowed on us the ability to use the amazing song Anything by Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland. So big shout out to them and Mad Decent Records for allowing our podcast to use that as our theme music. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also have to give a huge thank you to our VIP supporters. These are the people on Patreon who subscribed with monthly donations to help build our product. They are Shar, Stephanie, Clint, and Alex. Thank you all. And, I really, really appreciate it. Everything that comes in goes right back into the product here to try and continue building and growing and getting our production value even better. So if you would like to become a VIP contributor, you can head over to Patreon. Best way to get there is to go to our website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. In the top right corner with all the social media buttons is a Patreon button where you can make a donation. For everybody who does, you get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers. So please, if you feel like helping support us, head on over there. Really, really appreciate all of the support. And like I said before, couldn't have done it without you. So before we go any further, huge thank you again to our new listeners. If this is your first time here, like I said, welcome. Stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. So next time, it won't be your first time here. If you are listening right now on a podcast directory and you want to be part of our live stream, you can head over to YouTube. Every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time, we do a live stream. Usually get some people in the chat. It's a lot of fun, interactive, kind of building the community. And if you are, able to, please throw us a subscription on YouTube. We still need a few more to really build our base up on YouTube. So really appreciate that. If you are listening on a podcast directory and you hear something you like, please throw us a rating. I don't mind 5-star ratings. Really appreciate it. It helps, get our numbers up and get our rating up, obviously. And that'll help more people hear about us and more people check us out. So if you're on a podcast directory, please go ahead and give us a rating. I'm not begging for 5 stars, but if you hear something you like, please, rate us accordingly. And if you hear something you like, please share this with somebody, anybody, everybody. Helps us grow. Best way for us to get out there and get into, the public is by you guys. So please do that. And of course, if you are watching right now on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind, make sure to help support this podcast by giving us a download wherever you consume your podcasts from. I love seeing the numbers on YouTube, but the way we're going to grow is by getting our numbers up on the podcast directory. So thank you all for taking that time and throwing us a download. Really, really, really appreciate it. And if you are not currently following us on all the social media platforms, make sure to head to the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com again. And at the top, there are all the social media links. So make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're YouTube. We're probably going to be putting together a Discord here at some point because I just like Discord. Haven't done it yet. Don't think there's enough need, but at some point we will. So before we get into our first segment, we have to talk about what we are, what we do, and what we don't do. Again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery, and this is a Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a 12-step recovery-based podcast, but this is not a 12-step meeting. And to stay in line with the traditions of recovery, I do not reference or speak as a point of authority on any specific fellowship, any treatment centers, any recovery residences or sober livings or anything like that, because I want to make sure that I stay in line with those traditions. But if you have questions about a specific fellowship or a specific meeting or how to get to a meeting or kind of what is a little bit deeper than what we cover on this podcast, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can email me directly at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com or hit me up on any of the social media platforms because I'm more than happy to be here to help and give you recommendations for a specific fellowship aspect. But I don't want to do that here since this is press, media, film, and I want to make sure to stay in line with the tradition. So this is a great opportunity to get more information about recovery, about addiction. This is a great opportunity for people who maybe think they might be an addict to get more information to formulate that opinion. It's a great place for people who maybe aren't an addict, but they've had interactions with them, contact with them, maybe somebody in their family, significant other. This is just an opportunity to build a community, to answer questions, to help get the word about recovery out there. But again, this is not a 12-step meeting. This should not replace calling your sponsor, going to a meeting, doing step work, or any of the things that, us addicts do on a daily basis. This should just be an added bonus, if you will. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. Just want to make sure it's completely clear out there for everybody. And again, this is an opportunity for me to give my experience, strength, and hope on what has worked for myself within recovery. And, it's kind of funny. We're talking about the 12th step today and kind of carry the message. So that is what we do. That is what we don't do. If you're new here and you're like, I'm not an addict, but this guy spammed his information on Twitter, so I'm here checking it out. Stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. The beautiful thing, as I always talk about, is that even, for addicts, drug use is just a symptom. It is not the main problem. Drugs were just part of what got me into recovery. Becoming a better human being and growing as a person is what keeps me in recovery. So, welcome everybody to episode 12. Crazy. It has officially been... This is the 12th episode? Wow. I'm again eternally grateful and feel so blessed to have the support of everybody and everybody being on this journey with me and everybody helping me grow, and hopefully in turn I'm able to help somebody grow as well. So thank you all. And before we get into our first segment, I'm telling you right now, we got a fun show. We got step 12. We got my favorite moment of the week. We're answering more questions. We're giving them clean time shout-outs. So I've got my can of Bang, commonly known as Yeet Juice. Bang, shout-out. If you ever want to sponsor, holla. And we're ready. We're ready for today's episode. So let's get into the first segment of the week.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
Welcome to the lab, everybody, for our first segment each week called R&D, Recovery and Development, we look at a different step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle within the 12-step recovery model, and we give more information about it. We talk about how us addicts implement this into our lives, give kind of an overview and how we work each step. Now, I will say again, if you are not an addict, that's okay, because so much of recovery is simply about becoming a better person. You know, it's not just about removing the drug use. It's about doing the things to become better human beings. So, you know, stick around. You might hear something you like. I've heard from so many people who aren't in recovery, man, you know, I wish there was a way for me to do these steps and stuff like that. So I'm not out here saying, hey, if you're not in recovery, work the 12 steps. But I'm also not saying that, because I know for me personally, the 12 steps have been, you know, an amazing platform for me to grow and become a better human being. So that's what we do in this segment. We talk about experience, strength, and hope here. I might give a little bit of my opinion, but I will preface it before I do. So this is my experience with the 12th step, and let's get into it. So the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So there's kind of 3 different sections going on here, and we're going to get to each one of them. But as we do, we got to look at the spiritual principles first. So according to the literature, it says the 3 most important spiritual principles, and we're going to get to some other ones further down. But the first 3 that we need to look at are the spiritual principles of unconditional love, selflessness, and steadfastness. Now it says for unconditional love, it says no one needs love without conditions more than a suffering addict. And for selflessness, I like this quote. It says, it's a great paradox that selfless service becomes an expression of our deepest selves, caring more about allowing a higher power to work through us than it cares about recognition and glory. And then for the topic of steadfastness, it says practicing the principle of steadfastness means we need to keep on trying to do our best. Like we've talked about before, humility. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not the worst. I'm doing the best I can with what I have. So first off, we got to look at what is a spiritual awakening. Now, spiritual, again, this is a spiritual program, not a religious program. Hopefully, you're not as closed off as I was when I got into recovery, and I equated anything spiritual to that of some type of religiosity. I think that's a word. That's how my brain did it. But again, this program is not about religion. I know personally addicts who are atheists or agnostics who are perfectly capable and can strive in recovery, because this is not a religious program. But it definitely is a spiritual one. So, got to look at that spiritual awakening. It says in the literature, it says many different forms in the different personalities that we find in this fellowship. So there are so many different ways that spiritual awakenings occur. But there are some commonalities between them. Usually there is a sense of hope, especially early on. There's that you know, a lot of times you'll hear in the rooms the God shot. You know, that moment of hope, that moment of feeling despair leaving. It also says in the literature, it says the end to loneliness and a sense of direction in our lives, feeling more lighthearted more of the time, caring more about others, and of the ever-increasing ability to step outside ourselves and participate fully in life. Now, with that being said, you know, there are some times in my personal experience that I've had a spiritual experience that was, you know, not to go religious here, but was like a burning bush moment, was a huge moment that was a spiritual awakening for me. But that's not always the case. You know, I know of people personally who had a spiritual awakening because they, you know, I know somebody who crashed his vehicle into a semi-truck while he was high as hell. That was a spiritual awakening. I know people who, you know, have gone through these massive moments that, you know, led to this sense of a spiritual awakening. But that isn't always the case. For a lot of us, you know, spiritual awakenings happen progressively. And just for a point of clarity, just because we have one of these lightning bolt type of, you know, spiritual moments and spiritual awakenings doesn't mean that that's the only kind that we have. I know for me personally, my first spiritual awakening was when I had about 10, 12, 14 days in treatment. And there was an H&I panel, which H&I stands for hospitals and institutions. And those are people, that's a type of service work where members of that fellowship will bring a meeting into a treatment center or a jail or prison for people who physically cannot get to an outside meeting. And I remember it like it was yesterday, sitting in that H&I meeting, and a member shared a story that just connected. It just connected with my heart, connected with my soul, connected to me in ways I didn't know connection could occur. So for me, that was a thunder crash, lightning bolt type of spiritual awakening. That was something I can still go back to. And I hope every time I see this member, who, you know, lives in Vegas, and last time I was there, is still an active part of the fellowship. Every time I see this member, I always remind him of that spiritual awakening for me. Because as we'll talk about further on in the 12th step, by him doing his 12th step, it was my first spiritual awakening. And it's still that spiritual awakening, part of my 12th step. So his 12th step influenced my 12th step to hopefully influence somebody else's 12th step. It's kind of like this weird inception chain reaction type of thing that is one of the most beautiful things of recovery. So that for me was a watershed moment, if you will. But then there are other things that might not be for a specific thing, but hold weight. Like I remember when I was in treatment, I was getting close to the end. I was getting close to the end of my time. And I just was sitting on the couch, you know, after we'd done all of our stuff for the day. And I was sitting on the couch listening to an old iPod that had a song on it that I just sat there and listened to for hours and cried and felt hope. I don't know why I felt hope. I don't know what specifically. Again, this wasn't a, you know, moment like what I had at that H&I panel. But I felt hope. I could say the same thing when I went to my very first convention. I felt such a spiritual connection, such a sense of being spiritually alive. That was a spiritual experience. That was a spiritual awakening. So we just have to be you know, open and receptive to having spiritual awakenings, because I know for a fact there are people who probably have had spiritual awakenings but weren't open to the concept of it and therefore didn't really consider it a spiritual awakening. So that's something we definitely have to be cognizant of. It says that, you know, an awakening, this awakening is evidenced by the changes in our lives. So regardless of what your individual awakening is, or how maybe you feel like you haven't really had a spiritual awakening, I can say personally, as it says in the literature, that anybody who has worked steps, anybody who has developed a connection with a higher power has inherently had a spiritual awakening. By building, you know, our spirituality, by building a contact with a higher power, that is in and of itself a spiritual awakening. But, you know, in order to really build off of that spiritual awakening, we need to develop some level of serenity, some level of peace, some level of action within it. You know, if I simply have a spiritual awakening, that's great. If I would have had that spiritual awakening, you know, from that H&I panel, and then just decided not to be in recovery, I'm completely undermining that the power that is built into that spiritual awakening. I'm completely undermining the growth potential that spiritual awakening opens me up for. Not quite a phrasing there. We'll get one by the end of this episode, I'm sure of it. But that's why we need to really focus on building that peace and that love and that serenity. And the way we do that is within the 12th step. So that's just the outline of a spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening can be anything, truly, because we're all so individual within recovery. We're also, you know, we are all so similar in the fact that we're all just addicts trying to get one more day clean, but we're also so different in terms of how we, connect with a higher power of our understanding, with how we work steps based on the things that are brought up inside of us, about what character defects each of us, have that somebody might not at all. And so the spiritual awakening also has that ability. So realize that spiritual awakening can happen at any time, at any point, if we're receptive to it. So the next part, it says that we tried to carry the message to addicts. Now, this is my favorite part of the 12th step, because for me, this is the beauty of recovery. This is the beauty of the fellowship. It says in the literature, it says, the first way that we carry the message speaks for itself. People see us on the street and remember us as devious, frightened loners. They notice the fear leaving our faces. They see us gradually come alive. And it's so funny because I've had that exact, not, those exact words, but paraphrased from so many people from my past. And every time I hear it, it doesn't build up this ego or like, yeah, I'm killing the game. Oh, yeah. Nah. It reminds me that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. When I have somebody say, wow, you look so happy. Like, you look so bright. You look like the old you. I remember that you before drugs became your life. And you're becoming that again. And that's one of the greatest, again, not from an egotistical perspective, but that's one of the greatest things that I've experienced in recovery. Because then not only do I know that this process is working, not only do I know that this process is changing my life, other people are seeing that. Because a lot of times, we can be master manipulators of ourselves, especially, as addicts. We can say, oh, we're doing amazingly, when really we're not. But when other people see it, and I'm not saying I'm only striving for other people's appreciation, but when somebody else sees it, especially somebody who has seen the whole process, it continues that fire to continue growing, to continue becoming a better human being, to continue living by spiritual principles. So how are the ways that we carry the message? Honestly, by doing this in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that this podcast is me, doing my 12th step. No. But by showing that recovery is possible, by showing that recovery does work, it's about attraction, not promotion. And I love that. I love being able to be a beacon of light, of help, of showing that this program works. I am not different. Wow. I am no different than anyone else. I am no different than anyone else. Anybody that is seeking this way of life can achieve. And that's what we do when we go to meetings, when we share our experience, strength, and hope, when we speak at an H&I, when we're of service to a subcommittee, when we, somebody stops me on the at Jiffy Lube and says, wow, I see your key tags hanging in your car. I see the logo on the back of your car. Are you in recovery? Yeah, I am. Let's talk about it. By doing that in itself is participating in a 12th step. That's participating in carrying the message. And I know that the words do say carrying the message to the addict who still suffers, but by just carrying the message in general, that allows me, to carry it to addicts, to normies, to anybody. Because that's the type of life that I live now. I want to be able to help. I want to be able to carry a message of recovery. That's becoming who I am as a human being. I'm not simply, like, this is me, oh yeah, and I also go to meetings. No, I am a recovering addict. And that, for me, is one of the greatest gifts I've ever received, is being able to be a recovering addict. And that's because of working steps. That's because of being able to do this 12th step in general, carrying the message. You know, it says in the reading, it says, the more eagerly we wait in and work, the richer our spiritual awakening will be. And that is so tied in to being of service within the fellowship. And there are, like I said, there are so many ways to be of service, from actually holding service positions, like being a greeter before the meeting, to, chairing meetings, to doing service work at an area level or a regional level or a world level. But it doesn't have to just be that. One of the greatest ways to be of service is remembering a newcomer's name at a meeting. The next time they show up and you say, hey, so-and-so, sorry, Groot. If you say, hey, so-and-so, that in itself can be one of the greatest ways to carry, a sense of belonging for that person. And then by doing that, then hopefully they will do the same thing. See, so much of what we do in recovery, it ties back to the phrase of we can only keep what we have by giving it away. And that is why a lot of people say I'm a service junkie. I'm part of a lot of subcommittees because I love being able to give it back. I love being able to give it away. It says in the literature that boredom and complacency have no place in our new life. And I know, especially in the very beginning, I got so involved and did so much service because I didn't want to get bored, because I know how my brain works. I know so much of my using, especially in the early days, was because I was bored, because it was something to do. It was something to do. And I don't want to go back to that thought process. I don't want that thought process to even be anywhere near my brain. That's not how I want to live today. So, am I a service junkie? Yeah, probably. But it's working for me. So why would I change that? That's why, to me, I tell all my sponsees, you got to get involved with service, because service is exactly the way that we can give back what was so freely given to us. And again, it doesn't have to be on a regional convention. It doesn't have to be, being a GSR to the area. It can simply be showing up. It could simply be being the greeter and giving hugs. It could simply be helping stack chairs at the end of the meeting when, ever in-person meetings, whatever. But you know what I mean, pre-COVID, having a coffee maker, or having the person who makes the coffee, who cleans up, those things are all ways that we can give away what was so freely given to us, because at some point in the past, somebody else did that same thing. And at some point in the past, somebody before them did that same thing. And that's how the fellowships continue to strive, is by having people do selfless service. And it says selfless service of this work is the very principle of step 12. The very principle. And again, that's not just saying service work on a regional or area level. That's saying being of service, period. Whether it's, showing up 15 minutes early before the meeting and leaving 15 minutes after. It's that element of connection, of giving away what was so freely given to us. And by doing this, we can become instruments of our higher power's will. We will become instruments by acting in our higher power's will that allows our higher power to work through us, to help carry that message, to help that newcomer, to help keep the doors open at that meeting. That becomes what we can do. And one of the things that I will say, I love this line in here. It says, we cannot deny other addicts their pain, but we can carry the message of hope that was given to us by fellow addicts in recovery. At the end of the day, even when I want to sometimes, I can't recover for anybody else. I can't spare anybody else the pain of, life on life's terms. But I can carry the message the same way that H&I panel carried the message to me. I can do that. And if I'm doing that, then maybe I can help show that hope is there and pain isn't permanent. Maybe, hopefully. But we got to also look at the fact that even when we carry the message to the best of our ability, that doesn't mean that it's going to be truly received. I've had sponsees that constantly would relapse. Constantly. And I would share my message of recovery. I would share my message of, what has worked. I will give away what was freely given to me. But sometimes they're just not ready to hear it. And it can be frustrating. It says in the literature, it says, this can be frustrating. But before we give up, we need to remember that our choice isn't whether to carry the message, but how. Again, we need to give back what was freely given to us, even when it's not, accepted. And that can be very, very difficult. That can be very difficult when somebody's not willing to change or not willing to do the things that we all do to stay clean. But that doesn't mean that we stop giving them the message. It doesn't say, hey, carry the message for 4.7 times. And once you get to that 5th time, they're on their own. No, it doesn't say it. That's why in the rooms we say, keep coming back. Keep coming back. Because at some point, something is going to click. At some point, something is going to change. I have a friend who I'm actually going to be giving him a shout out later on in this episode, who I've known for the last 3 years, watched suffer and struggle for the last 3 years. And all I could do was continue to carry the message to him. And now he just got 30 days and actually is excited about recovery, actually is wanting to be in recovery because he kept coming back. Until something changed, until something within his spirit changed. And that's a beautiful thing. Let me tell you, that is a beautiful thing. One of the greatest things is watching that light bulb go on. And it makes all those times of having that little thought in my mind of like, really, I'm gonna do this again. This guy just can't get it. It makes all that 1,000% worth it. All of the times that we work with people that it doesn't pan out. That one time that it does is worth 1 billion of those, at least for this addict's experience. Personally, that's my experience. But one of the best ways to carry that message and to give back what was so freely given to us is by the power of example. Is by the power of showing up, by going to meetings, by being an active member of the fellowship, by talking to newcomers, by giving phone numbers. Again, men get men's numbers, women get women's numbers, especially early on. That's how we do it. But doing that, giving those numbers and answering that phone call, even when you don't want to, even when you have other things going on. That is the power that we gain by leading by example. Sticking to commitments, having responsibilities, making commitments and sticking to them. Whew. For an addict like me, that was tough. I didn't stick to a commitment for more years than I can count. But by doing work within recovery, now I can make commitments and stick to them. But another thing we got to look at, we got to make sure that within the 12th step, we're not giving advice. We're not telling somebody to do something. We don't operate in recovery on giving advice. We operate on sharing what my experience, strength, and hope is. And if that helps somebody, then that's a beautiful thing. But by telling somebody something, not only can it become condescending, not only can it become controlling, but that's just not what we do. And that can be so tough. That can be so tough. When you see someone going through the exact same things, that maybe you did. I see somebody going through the exact same things I did with the exact same thought processes that I had, and is not open to my suggestions, not open to my experience, strength, and hope. That control character defect comes up and just makes me want to just say, do this. This is what you're doing. But we don't do that. We share our experience, strength, and hope. We give suggestions, we give guidance, but we do not tell anyone what to do. Because at the end of the day, someone that we're giving that experience, strength, and hope to has to be willing to not just take suggestions, but then act accordingly based on their higher power's will, not just because they're told to. I know, like for me personally, I feel best about myself when I do something for myself. Speaks to recovery. I see so many people that get into recovery because somebody told them to do it, because their parents forced them to do it, because the courts forced them to do it. not because they want to do it. But when we get to do something for ourselves, that builds our self-esteem, that builds who we are. So that's why it's so important that we don't give, orders or advice as much as we lead by experience, strength, and hope. And one of the things we have to remember within this, and this is one of the difficult things that I've seen a lot, especially over the last year with the pandemic, especially with a lot of people who don't feel they need recovery anymore, or, haven't been carrying the message, aren't working a 12th step, and then inevitably think they're in control of their lives. How, it says specifically in the literature, it says, we quickly forget that all our past efforts at controlling our lives failed. And I have seen that so many times in the pandemic. I've seen that from people that I desperately love, people who've been a part of my recovery for 3 years, who just decided it wasn't for them anymore. And I wish them all the best. I really do. And I hope that they are able to not end up back in the rooms. But I don't want that for me. I don't want to have that thought process that, maybe I don't need recovery. Maybe I don't need the fellowship. Because I know how I can be. If I start having that thought a little bit, it's going to snowball. It's going to snowball, and it's going to become something that I can force myself to believe. I can force myself to believe that, I'm recovered. I don't need this. I could use this substance. I could do this. I could do that. No. Before I even start to have that thought, I've got to squash it. And that, again, is why I do so much service. Because if I have, my way and my brain starts acting up and then I only go to one meeting a week or one every 2 weeks, I don't know what that would look like. But I know that when I have a commitment at my home group every week and I'm of service at area and at region and on these subcommittees, I know I'm always going to be connected to it. So I'm not going to ever have that thought process of, I don't know if I really need this in my life. So another thing I really want to touch on, and this was huge in my story, is the fact that we don't need to have worked a 12th step in order to be adding it into our lives. And now for me personally, this was my story from pretty much 15 days clean. It says, one of the things you'll hear is that even an addict with 1 day clean can carry the message. Because that addict with 1 day clean is a miracle. Any addict with any days clean is a miracle. So that addict with 1 day clean being a miracle can carry that message of hope to that newcomer who's sitting in the meeting withdrawing. That's how it works. So just because we haven't worked a 12th step doesn't mean that we can't, put it into our lives. It says that even a member with 1 day in the fellowship can carry the message that the program works. Because at the end of the day, all we're looking for is to get 1 day clean. That's it. And then tomorrow, 1 day clean. And then tomorrow, the day after that, 1 day clean. Just for today, I'm not going to use. Just for today. So when somebody comes in and has 3 days, they might feel they have nothing to offer, but that person with 3 days clean could be the most massive hope shot to somebody who's currently withdrawing. And that's how this program continues to work over and over and over. For me personally, I got super involved with my recovery. And everybody knows I'm in recovery. It's on my social medias, it's on my shirts, it's on my car, it's on, everything is about recovery. But just because that's how I choose to embrace my recovery and how I choose to carry the message doesn't mean that that's what everybody should do. Doesn't mean that somebody else might not, embrace it to that level and that they're wrong. No. It's just for me personally, that's what I've done. Everything on my social media has a recovery hashtag something. Recovery car spotter life, recovery Marvel fanatic, recovery dad life. Everything does. Because for me, recovery is a part of my life. Recovery is, carrying the message, showing that recovery works is a part of my life. It is one of the driving factors in my life. So I want to be about that. I want to have conversations with people who are curious about recovery. I want to have conversations with people who think all addicts are pieces of shit junkies. I want to have those conversations because that's how I carry the message. And that's an exciting thing for me. Even though some people don't like it. Some people don't like the amount that I carry, that I talk about recovery. And that's okay. Because for me, it's what works. I've had so many experiences in life embracing my recovery. We literally went to a rave and had a recovery meeting in the middle of a rave. People stumbling all over the place. Like we're in the middle of the meeting. This chick grabbed me and started making out with me. She wasn't in recovery. She was rolling her balls off, laying on the grass where we were. But that's what we do. We carry recovery with us everywhere we go so that in situations in life that come up, we have recovery with us, at least for me. I've gone to happy hour, drinking a bang or drinking water. And when somebody's, hey, you want to drink? No, I'm in recovery. Oh, you? Because last time I saw you were snorting lines off of a toilet seat. So you're in recovery? Yeah, I'm in recovery. Oh, well, what's that like? Now I get to carry that message. And that's a great feeling. That's an exciting feeling for me. And I'm not saying that should be everybody's story. I'm not saying that's what everybody should do or how they should operate. But for me personally, that's how I carry the message. That is how I implement it within my life. I got to say, a lot of people think, because of how much I embrace recovery, that I'm anti-drug. And that's not what I am. I'm pro-recovery. I'm anti-drug for me, personally. Because I know I can't use drugs successfully. I've seen the evidence of that. But I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody, yo, you need to stop that. You need to stop that. Stop. No. Because again, that's not what we do. I'm going to show my experience, strength, and hope. I'm going to build off of attraction rather than promotion. And if it helps somebody and helps get somebody into recovery, that's awesome. But that's not, I'm not anti-drug. I'm anti-drug for me. But everybody else is their own story, their own journey. So next we got to get into the part that says practice these principles in all our affairs. And now, first word of that is so important is practice. Practice. Practice? We talk about practice? Hopefully somebody out there gets that AI reference. Still one of the greatest gifts, sound bites in sports history. But this is the essence of practice, because practicing principles in all our affairs is a daunting task at first. And there's so many spiritual principles that have come up through working the steps. We talk about hope, surrender, acceptance, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, faith, tolerance, patience, humility, unconditional love, sharing, compassion, empathy, and caring, just to name a few. And those are just things that arise during normal life situations. And if we are in a situation where, something arises and we don't know exactly what spiritual principle to apply to it, we just think of what would be the opposite of the spiritual defect. If we're in a situation that we want to act in defect, well, what would be the opposite of it? That's probably the spiritual principle. So we found that operating from a perspective of applying these principles within ourselves makes it a lot easier to apply them outwardly to others. If I'm more accepting of myself, I'm going to be more accepting of others. If I'm more caring for myself, I'm going to be more caring for others. And some of these are going to be a lot more difficult to apply than others. It says in the literature, it says we find joy as we start to learn how to live by the principles of recovery. And that is a fact. But that isn't an easy thing always. Because again, it says all our affairs. So I can say personally, they grow, they build. The first time that I was in a situation that I didn't lie in, when I normally would have prior, that felt good. That showed as we talked about in episode 2 regarding insanity, if you haven't checked it out, please head back on over to episode 2 of the Clean and Filthy podcast. We talked about when we do something different than we ever have in the past. This is an example of being restored to sanity. So that first time that a situation came up that I would have always lied about, every single time, point blank period, would have lied.
That part.
And I didn't. That felt good. And it made it easier that next time. And easier that next time. It's like we talked about in step 6. Also, check out episode 6. Of the more that we are cognizant of our character defects, the less we want to act in them. And that's the same thing. The more that we're acting in spiritual principles, the less okay acting in in character defects feels okay. You know, being able to, some of the things are easy. Not stealing. Okay, you should not steal in all your affairs. But that might not just be, a physical thing. You might, don't go steal from Walmart, but also don't steal somebody's time. Don't steal somebody's love. Don't steal somebody's affection. Those are where we start to, implement our honesty or these different spiritual principles into all our affairs. Becoming an example of responsibility. I remember the first time when I had like 4 months clean and I was able to chair my home group. And that feeling of responsibility and of dependability and of like, holy shit, these people are trusting me with a key to a room that has money in it. And I know the code to get the money. They believe in me. And that builds up our self-esteem. That builds up who we are. It says in the literature, practicing spiritual principles in our daily lives leads us to a new image of ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing. Having that new image of ourselves, having that new feeling of ourselves, it's a beautiful thing. And then it says, gradually applying these principles in all areas will become easier. Being honest across the board, not just when we want to be or feel we need to be. Being responsible all the time, sticking to commitments all the time, choosing the spiritual response even when we don't want to, doing the things that we said we were going to do, even when we don't want to. There have been plenty of times that I, did not want to answer a phone call of somebody, or I did not want to go and do this step work, or did not want to go and help this person move, but I made a commitment. And if I'm practicing the spiritual principle of responsibility in all my affairs, then I fulfill those commitments. And once we really start implementing all of these things into our lives, it's a beautiful thing. We get the feeling of being glad to be alive, actually living, not just surviving. It says in the literature, we feel that our lives have become worthwhile. And that's a fact. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen instantly. But by doing the work, I can tell you from my experience, strength, and hope, I feel that my life is worthwhile. I feel that I'm doing something in my life to help others. I feel I have a sense of purpose. I don't know exactly what that sense of purpose is. I don't know exactly where that journey on my purpose street will lead me. But I know that I feel worth it. I feel that I'm doing something that is worth it. So that is the essence of implementing the 12th step within my life, within our lives. And I'm going to close with this quote because I absolutely love this. And it says, yes, we are a vision of hope. We are examples of the program working. The joy that we have in living clean is an attraction to the addict who still suffers. And that's one of the greatest things I can do in life. One of the greatest things I can do is simply show up and be an example. Sometimes being an example of what not to do. But regardless, I'm being an example and I'm helping. And that's it for me. That's the shit right there. That shit right there? That shit right there. Yeah. It's called life. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So that's what we've got for today's entry in R&D. Next week, we're going to be starting a new challenge. We're going to be going into the traditions, and it's a lot more in depth. And, yeah, I got to call my sponsor before we start doing it. I'm just going to say that. So that's what we got for this week of R&D. I know that went long, but there's so much to cover within the 12-step, and I love the 12-step. That's just what it is. Hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you. And now we're going to get into our next segment called My Favorite Moment of the Week. Sorry, I had to get a little drink there. So this is a part of the show where we talk about something that has occurred over the last week, hence my favorite moment of the week. It could be something from news, sports, social media, Instagram, memes, pop culture, whatever. But it's just something that has been fun over the last week. Might just be my favorite meme on Instagram. Might be my favorite TikTok that I did not watch on my own, but somebody sent to me, because I will never be on TikTok. Send me them TikToks. So this is completely my opinion. This is no tie with Into Recovery. This is just for me. This is something that's fun. Talk about the things that have happened over the last week. So there was a bunch of stuff that went down over the last week. First and foremost, while we aren't doing my favorite moment as much as my favorite moments, the first of my favorite moments is that I am still alive sitting here right now. And I'm not, in a hospital bed or had my leg amputated, since I had a very fun encounter with a rattlesnake. I've lived in Arizona my entire life and have seen rattlesnakes, from a distance. But this little diamondback was perfectly camouflaged, and I was literally 6 inches away from stepping on it, and it would have been all bad. So hooray for that. That was a whole thing. I'm pretty sure my heart has finally just now returned to the proper place and is no longer in my throat. Also got to give a shout out to my boy Yehuda. Had a great performance. He did a live stream performance. It was his first time performing live in 2.5 years, and he killed it. Goosebumps on fleek. Well done, my brother. Love you. Also got to talk about some of these Bill Gates memes. They came out late yesterday because he's getting a divorce, and there are some that are absolutely hilarious. Hilarious, hilarious. Big shout out Lewis Hamilton. He won the Portuguese Grand Prix. Second win of the season. Should have been 3. Mercedes killing it. Let's go. My favorite meme of the week was the Captain Phillips meme. If you haven't seen Captain Phillips, it's a Tom Hanks movie about a ship being, pirated. And there's a scene in it where one of the pirates says, look at me, I'm the captain now. And somebody took Sam Wilson's head in his Captain America outfit and put it on top of the pirate's face, and it was everything. That part. Loved it so much. We're going to a lot of sports this one. Sorry if we lose some people, but hey, my favorite moment of the week. Next, we got to give a shout out to Russell Westbrook for not only always having some incredible drip that I personally could never wear, but he somehow pulls off. I don't understand it completely, but he does. For getting another 20 rebound, 20 assist game. He's the only person in history to have done it twice. And also securing another season-long triple-double average for the 4th time. Only one person ever had done it even once. Oscar Robertson, 1 time. He's done it 4. He might never get that championship, but he has to be one of the best point guards, period. Just looking at that stuff. And he's funny as hell. I always, really like him. NFL draft happened. Hooray, there was actually a draft. It wasn't Roger Goodell sitting on his recliner, even though the recliner made its way to the draft. I'll admit, I don't care much about NFL drafts. I really don't. Because so much of the NFL draft doesn't matter. There are so many first-round picks who, tear their ACL the first day of training camp, tear their pectoral the next year after rehab, and we never hear from again. So for me, following it's a little too hard. One of the biggest issues, one of the biggest instances of this was Robert Condici. I loved that dude in college. I was so excited about him coming to the league, and he did nothing. So I've kind of got a resentment against that. But the best part of it, really the only part of it that I care about, is watching the behind-the-scenes clips that teams put out of their GM or their coach calling that player prior to the pick being announced. And that, I just got goosebumps. That's the type of stuff that I love, seeing those type of reactions. Got to talk for a second about the pictures that came out of the Kentucky Derby between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and the memes that came with it, I don't get it. Maybe I'm not like rich enough or cool enough to understand the whole vibe behind the Kentucky Derby, but it's a fucking horse race that lasts for literally like a minute and motherfuckers lose their minds over it. Only lasts a minute. Yeah.
Phrasing?
I just don't care. I like gambling at times. Never got into horse racing because to me it just seems so arbitrary. Like, I like that one. That horse is brown. Let's put $1 million on. I don't fucking know. But the memes and the ridiculous, I can't even say outfits. They're costumes. Motherfuckers be wearing costumes to go out and watch a goddamn horse race. Why? I don't know. I don't know why that's acceptable, but people dressing up as their favorite superheroes and going to Comic-Con is considered weird. I don't know. I don't get it. Whatever. Have to say, the release of the titles for Marvel Phase 4, whew, had your boy shook. So excited. So excited. So excited. So excited. We already talked about Marvel enough last week. We're not going to do it again this time. So, don't worry. We're not going into a Marvel rant. Stick around. One thing I have to talk about, and it's definitely not a favorite moment of the week, but I do want to talk about it, is Joe Rogan's comments. And I like Joe Rogan. I think he's one of the best, announcers, obviously, MMA's ever had. I personally have always enjoyed his podcast, but saying something like young people shouldn't get the vaccine is potentially detrimental. And even when you walk it back afterwards by saying, I'm a fucking moron, nobody comes to me for valid opinions, listen to Dr. Fauci, just saying it can have a detrimental impact. So I feel like, when you get to that level, if no matter what I feel, to say something like that from my audience, which is 1/1 billionth what his is, I don't know the actual numbers, but he gets an absolute shitload of downloads. To do that, I just don't feel as responsible. So do better, Joe. Do better. But my favorite moment of the week, and we're going sports, but my favorite moment of the week is the Phoenix Suns making the playoffs after a 10-year drought. Now, I'm going to give a little context within this because I've been a lifelong Suns fan. Born and raised in Arizona. I've gone to games since as long as I can remember. I mean, I remember going to the Madhouse on McDowell. I remember, not quite at the very, very beginning, but, I don't remember much of like the Larry Nance era, but I remember the Kevin Johnson, the Tom Chambers, the Thunder Dan Marley, the Kurt Rambis, the double overtime win game against Portland, I think. Yeah, it was Portland where it was like 153 versus 151. I remember reenacting it with my boy on NBA Jam. You remember that game? That game was such fire. It was 2-on-2, and each player had that huge head, and if you got 3 shots in a row, he's on fire. Shout out to anybody who remembers that game because NBA Jam was the shit. I loved that game. But I remember those type of things. And for 13 straight years, the Suns were in the playoffs. I remember where it started, and then it built with Barkley. The Barkley era is what cemented my love for the NBA. I was a younger kid. I was impressionable to the excitement of having an MVP on the team, of having, a coach in Paul Westphal, RIP, great coach, doing things in a different way. I went to Charles Barkley's basketball camp when it was at the Phoenix First Assembly over off of Cave Creek Road with Chuck Daly and David Robinson, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Part of the reason I always loved Charles Barkley. That whole time was what got me truly just loving basketball so much. Also, why I will never in any way, shape, or form be able to cheer for the Bulls, because the heartbreak from 1993 was something I still feel. It's palpable, which speaks to the way that fans of sports are wired. The fact that something from almost, 20 years ago is still that impactful in my life. But whatever. It is what it is. It's how we work, I guess. Also, fun fact, the Suns are the only team in NBA history to be a part of both of the triple overtime games in the finals. Fun fact. Again, also during that time, we should have beaten the Rockets. Finally get a break from Jordan and can't beat the Rockets. Hate the Rockets. Then we get to the 2000s, which were initially a little tough. 03 was the first time in 14 seasons that the Suns didn't make the playoffs. We had those times with Jason Kidd, who then got shipped off for his issues. We had Penny Hardaway for very little time. Had Stephon Marbury, who I will always love. Shout out to Steph. I always love him. Then in 2004, Nash comes back. We drafted him, traded him, got him back. Cool. Amari Stoudemire blowing up, becoming a beast. I will always say Amari Stoudemire is one of the players that I feel could have been truly all-time great. Poor microfracture surgery in his knees. He was never the same, but when he was on, he was on. If only DeAndre Ayton could be more like that. But during this time, these were some of my best basketball memories. I was a season ticket holder through a lot of this. I ended up, one of my buddies and I got upper level seats. And my mother and her, my stepdad had like ninth row seats. And they didn't go a lot. So a lot of times I got to go in that, and it was so much fun. And being around, this winning mentality of back-to-back Nash, MVPs, and watching Sean Marion with the ugliest jump shot in history, and Joe Johnson and Mike D'Antoni, and this whole 7 seconds or less, offense, almost no defense, but whatever, being part of that. Like, one of my most fun memories was being at the game in the ninth row, and I had an Eddie House jersey custom made right when he got to the team because I loved Eddie House. Shout out to Sun Devils. I'm ASU's my alma mater. I loved Eddie House, and I got a custom jersey of his made. And he was coming to the game. I'm like, yo, Eddie! And he turned, and I showed him my jersey, and he's like, what's up, man? That was cool. Those are the type of things that sports fans live for. So some of those memories were some of the greatest memories of my life. Also, that was before my addiction had gotten bad. There were plenty of games that I used at those games, but my addiction hadn't gotten to the point where it was the only thing in my life. So some of those were the best things. Getting to meet all these different players. We had a friend who I was able to get into the backstage areas and see these people and get pictures. It was so much fun. Also built my absolute disdain for the Spurs, a little bit lesser degree the Mavericks, but pretty much all teams from Texas in general, can't stand them. But the wheels really started falling off once we grabbed Shaq. And I loved having Shaq. It was cool. The big Shaqtus loved it. He's a great guy. I think he's amazing. But he was not good for a team that's running 7 seconds or less type of basketball. And things really just started going downhill from there. With horrible signings, one of them being Josh Childress. I love Josh Childress. I got to meet him. I got to sit in his Ferrari. He was next door neighbors with my family. He was super cool, but why the fuck did we pay him so much money? The signing of both Brandon Knight, Eric Bledsoe, some bad stuff. Then we had this nonstop revolving door of players and coaches and draft picks that didn't really work, from Isaiah Thomas to the Morris twins, to Tyson Chandler, Alex Len. I will say having Vince Carter on the team was pretty cool, though, so I will say that. And by 2015, we were a mess.
Garbage. Absolute trash.
Yeah, and so was my life. So I will admit, there were parts in there I didn't even know about. Like, it was cool we drafted Devin Booker, right? But I had no idea that the Suns had traded for Mr. Kardashian himself, Chris Humphries. I had no clue. Like, I was doing research for this episode last night and was like looking through the Wikipedia, and I was like, Chris Humphries was a son? Also, what happened to Chris Humphries? Did he just disappear off into the sunset with his bag he made from being on Kardashians, or getting paid to marry Kim, or what was the deal? I don't even know. Like, anybody seen him? Chris Humphries, if you're out there, holla at me, bro. And things got horrible. At one point we fired Earl Watson as coach when we went 0-3 with 2 40-point plus defeats. Things were bad. Things were very bad. We were not doing well. Constantly worst team in the league. And then 2019 came, and there was some hope. Adding Monty Williams as coach and adding James Jones as GM. And shout out James Jones. He's a really cool dude. I met him a couple times. Shout out him. Mikal Bridges starts playing better. DeAndre Ayton starts playing better. There will always be that Luka Doncic comparison with them. it is what it is. I don't think Ayton's ever going to be all-time great, but if he's a serviceable center, I'm good with it. And everything starts to get to hitting stride right before the pandemic. But hey, close the season out in the bubble, go 8-0, but don't make the playoffs. All right. Well, now we're officially at 10 years. And for somebody like me who's so used to their team always being good, not making the playoffs is like a really weird thing. I can imagine, it's like being obviously not the same level, but like being a Yankees fan. It's just like expected. You're going to make the playoffs. Maybe you're not going to win it all, but you're going to make the playoffs at least. Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? Another great sports sound clip there. So then the big thing. We trade for Chris Paul. Now, I've always loved Chris Paul. I've always loved his attitude, the fact he's got, super Napoleon complex, being only 6'1", they list him as, but he's only 6 feet tall. He's always been very scrappy. He's kind of the guy that, if he's on your team, he's scrappy. If you're playing against him, he's kind of dirty. But he's always been super, intense. Number 4 overall pick, Rookie of the Year, All-Star Game MVP, all NBA selections, all defense selections. I loved the Lob City Clippers days. It was so much fun to watch. I love his commercials on State Farm. They're well done. I mean, not only, Jake from State Farm looking all diesel with them guns, but, we get some Chris Paul. It's amazing. But I did not think it was a good trade. Giving up Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, a first-round pick, and $41 million against the salary cap for this year for a 35-year-old dude. I was wrong.
That part.
Because sometimes all that's needed is that missing piece. And it might be an overpayment for that missing piece from a production level. But since he's been there, Devin Booker has been playing lights out. Since he's been there, he's helped create a team, not just a collection of stars. Because outside of Booker and Ayton, and like maybe Jay Crowder, who's kind of star, the team is I don't want to say a bunch of nobodies because they're all NBA players, but they're not huge names. But they're growing into amazing players. Whether it's Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Carter, Saric, these are people who consistently are coming in and developing their game. And I really 100% believe that is because of the coaching of Monty Williams and the leadership element of Chris Paul. And so that brings up that interesting thought of like, what is leadership? How much is leadership really worth? Because usually you wouldn't say $41 million would be worth anybody other than like LeBron, Durant, Yanni Vowels, or the Brow, or Zion maybe. Probably not even Zion, maybe Zion. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. But like that, because you think about just what they can do on the floor. But when you start bringing in those intangible elements of that focus, that hustle, that determination, that developing of camaraderie, can you put a price tag on that? So I have to admit that I'm wrong. 100%. Because not only did we clinch a playoffs for the first time in 10 years, but officially, we're going for the first seed. We were in the first seed. Then yesterday, the Jazz won. We didn't play, so they took the first seed back. But regardless, this is a team. But it's still a little scary. It's still a little scary because there's still that part of me that's like, are we really that good? We don't have the stars. Look at Brooklyn. They got the big three. Like, even Yanni Vowels, who's one of the best players in the league, has got Middleton. So there's that part of me, but I have to remember that this isn't the same Suns. And maybe, just maybe, this can be not just the Suns of the 2000s, but this could be like the Suns of 93. Except this time, there's no fucking Jim Paxton to hit a goddamn three-pointer and rip my fucking heart out of my chest. Resentment against that motherfucker. That's what I'm saying. So that's my favorite moment of the week. I'm very excited. I've always liked sports. I always like basketball. I love, watching. I'll watch all playoff basketball, even if I can't stand the teams or the players. But when it's one of your team, It just makes things more fun. And I don't have to worry about all of my attention being on using drugs instead of, being able to pay attention to the things that have always mattered to me and are mattering to me again. So that's what we have for my favorite moment of the week. Again, my favorite moment of the week. I'm sorry if it wasn't somebody else's favorite moment of the week, but again, that's what this segment's about. And if you have anything else, any other moments that pop up, you want to send them to me on Instagram. I love watching memes from people, see if they might make it onto the show. That's just what we do. So that's what we've got for this week of my favorite moment of the week. And now it is time to get into our next segment.
It's time to Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right. Our next segment of the week is called Ask an Addict. This is the segment of the show where I, being the resident addict of this podcast, answer listeners and viewers' questions. I like answering questions, so send me questions. If you have a question that you would like to be answered on air, make sure to send it over at either Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, on any social media, or simply go to the website, www.CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and click on the Contact Us page. Specifically say that a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing regarding recovery are pretty well accepted, guidelines or standards, if you will, within recovery. But, we also want to make sure that if I do talk about something with an opinion, I let you know. So first question. I actually got this question last night. It was really cool. I was doing a public relations presentation for a school, for a class of like social workers. And they, what I like about doing public relations is that we get to see the perspective of people who have no information about recovery. And that's another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is because there are so many people out there who might not know anything about recovery. And I want to try to be able to help and answer some questions. So this being able to be, in the community and see people's questions allows me to think about certain things and realize that everybody doesn't have knowledge about certain topics. So the question I was asked was, how do you get a sponsor? And we've talked about this before of like, what you should, when you should start sponsoring, when should you get a sponsor, but how do you get a sponsor? And it's funny because for me, it seems like such a known thing. But if for somebody who's maybe never been in recovery before, or never been to a meeting, or never had a sponsor, this could be a very confusing and scary topic. So what I would say, first and foremost, the easiest way to get a sponsor is raise your hand in a meeting and say, "Hi, I'm new. I need a sponsor." Inevitably, after the meeting, somebody's going to come up to you with a bunch of phone numbers, usually a men's list if you're a man, a women's list if you're a woman, and say, here's a list of guys who would be willing to sponsor you. Give them a call. Simple as that. Simple as that. And we've talked about before, what do you look for in a sponsor? We say we want to find somebody that has something we want, has recovery we want, has, speaks eloquently, does something that we can get hope from. Somebody that we can vibe with. My old sponsor, he shared in a meeting when he was picking up clean time, and he said a couple comments that in that moment I identified with so much. I was like, he's going to be my sponsor. And so after the meeting, I went up and I said, "Hey man, my name is Matthew. I'm an addict. I loved your share. I would really love to do step work with you." And he said, "All right, cool. Call me. And call me for a certain amount of days, show your willingness, then we'll get down to work." So that is the simplest thing of how to get a sponsor, is go to a meeting and open your mouth. And then when you get those numbers, use those numbers and show that willingness to put in the work. Because I can tell you from my perspective, when somebody asks me to sponsor them, I'm going to make sure that they really want to work and do work in recovery. It's not just going to be, okay, cool, yeah, I'll be your sponsor, and then I never talk to him again. It's going to be, cool, I'll be your sponsor, but you're going to need to call me every single day for the next week. And then you're going to need to do this, and you're going to need to do this. And, these are the things that I've set as, requirements within my sponsorship, because that's what was done to me. And that was probably what was done, to my sponsor from my grand sponsor, and so on and so forth. Again, we give back, we keep what we have by giving it back. So that is the process of how do you get a sponsor. It can be a little scary. That fear of like, I got to go ask this other individual that I've never really, that I don't have a relationship with. I got to go ask him to like be my sponsor. It can feel weird. I admit that. It can feel weird. I've stood outside of the fellowship hall and seen like a treatment center would be there, and like one of the BHTs, the behavioral health techs, would be like standing with somebody who I knew was a newcomer and was like, no, just go ask him. Come on, just go ask him. It almost felt like high schoolish. Like you're like standing there and there's like, you see somebody like coming over to you. Come on, just go ask for his number. It's okay. Just go ask for his number. Just come on, just ask for his number. And then finally, they get the courage and walk over and be like, hey, so-and-so said that you might be sponsoring. I'm looking for a sponsor. And it's funny to watch because it's so typical of being a newcomer. That fear of rejection, that fear of feeling like you're not good enough. When we're able to completely push that away and walk through our fear, beautiful things happen. So that is the simplest thing I could say of how you get a sponsor. It's pretty simple. Can feel difficult, can feel scary, but it's pretty simple at the end of the day. So if you have any other questions about how to get a sponsor, you want more information, or if you're looking for a sponsor, send me a message. I can give you some guys' numbers, and or if you're a woman, I can give you the women's list as well, and can get you set up with somebody. Next question I had is, did I go to treatment? And I've talked about this before, that I did go to treatment, but I wanted to give a little bit more information about it. So I went to treatment after clawing and fighting and not wanting to go. Finally, I had gotten beaten down enough that I had no other option. I got to the point where treatment was my only option. I had burned every other bridge. I had nobody else that I could, forced to enable me. I had nobody else I could lie, cheat, steal from. I was at my bottom. My gift of desperation was overwhelming. So I finally went to treatment, and it was terrifying. It was something I couldn't fathom going away for 30 days. Like the thought process of like, oh my God, I'm going to be disconnected from the world for 30 days. What is the world going to do without me? I mean, honestly, they're going to not have to have as much shit shoplifted and as much mayhem done. But in my thought process was like, what's the world going to do? Oh my God. I'm so important. What's going to happen? But I can always say that choice to go to treatment was one of the absolute best things of my life. And maybe it wasn't so much of a choice as much as I had no other option. But once I got there, being open-minded and willing to try things and to try and just stay open. Because like I said, when I first went to treatment, I wasn't planning on staying clean. I wasn't planning on being in recovery. I was planning my relapse. When the first week I was in treatment. I was like, I'm not an addict. I've got a problem with this substance, not this substance. I'm just not going to use this substance, and then I'll be fine. I'm just not going to do this, but I'm still going to do this substance. So now I got to figure out how to fake my piss tests because I had to do drug testing. I'm like, but I'm not an addict. But I was still open-minded enough to try and get everything I could out of the different, sessions that we would have in treatment or the different classes that we had. And I was open-minded, to listen when an H&I group came in. And as I said earlier, that spiritual awakening happened because of that. And I'm sitting here now because of that. Treatment doesn't have to be a part of your story. I know plenty of people who never went to treatment, who got clean in the rooms of the fellowship. I know people who were kicking, heroin withdrawals, sitting in my home group and are still clean to this day. So it's not a prerequisite, but it is a lot of our story, and thankfully, I did my detox and I did my 35 days of inpatient. And thankfully, within that time, I realized that I needed more. I needed more work. I went to treatment in Las Vegas, and I was planning on coming back to Arizona after 30 days. Again, because I didn't have a problem. I didn't, I was just going to go get off this one substance, whatever. But by being open-minded and having that spiritual awakening, I realized that recovery was something I really wanted to give my all to. And so I ended up changing it so where I could do my IOP in Vegas, and I went to sober living. Because the treatment step down is in order for a reason, just like the steps are in order for a reason. The treatment step down is in order for a reason to help the rate of retention of recovery, if you will, to help the fact that to make it work. We go to detox, we go to inpatient, we go to PHP, we go to IOP, we go to OP, sober living involved. To me, that is what worked. I'm not saying that has to be everybody's story, but I'm saying for me personally, that worked. And then after about 4 months of being clean in Las Vegas, developing those relationships, developing that connection to the fellowship, to the community of the fellowship in Las Vegas, I then was able to transition out here to Arizona. And thankfully, I had been back into town a few times. I had been to the Arizona convention. I had been to what is now my home group, multiple times when I was coming back and forth, before my son was born. So I was able to develop those relationships and those connections so that I didn't have to walk into a room with people I'd never met before and, develop those things. I'd already been developing them. So that when I moved back here, my recovery didn't lag at all. I went from going to, this many meetings in Vegas to now going to this many meetings here in Arizona, and was able to continue that process. Again, I'm not saying that's got to be everybody's, story, but for me and for a lot of people that I have seen, stay clean, especially recently, having those steps is very important for me. And like I said, there could be somebody who never goes to treatment and, stays clean for the rest of their life and never relapses, just like there could be somebody who goes to treatment and relapses the day they get out. So much of it comes down to not what we do to get clean, but the things we do to stay clean. It's not about that process of what it takes to get clean, but the things that we do within our recovery on a daily basis to stay clean. That, to me, is what really matters. So that's my, treatment. I'm not saying a treatment spiel because for me, treatment worked. I'm not giving advice. I'm not telling you to go to treatment or not go to treatment. I'm saying what my experience, strength, and hope is. And that is that for this addict, treatment, then, PHP, then IOP, then OP, all with sober living and constant meeting attendance and meeting involvement within the fellowship, being of service, is what has worked for me. And like I said, just for today, relapse isn't a part of my story. Relapse is a part of a lot of people's story, but it doesn't have to be. Just like treatment is part of a lot of people's story, but it doesn't have to be. So that's what we got. We went over earlier. We went over time on step 12, so we're only going to answer those 2 questions today. We got more questions for next week that we're going to get into a little bit deeper, but I don't want to go too long. And we got to get to them clean time shout-outs. So this is a part of the show where every single week we take a couple minutes to recognize and congratulate people who have obtained different universally accepted milestones within recovery. And those are a newcomer, which is 29 days or less, 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, and also multiple years, which is 2 or more years clean. But we also like to do a little different. So we like to give shout outs for people if you hit a big number. So if you got like 100 days or 500 days or 1,000 days or 10,000 days, we like giving those shout outs and giving that recognition, especially when you get up to those higher numbers, because then we only celebrate once a year. So we gotta have something to get a little hype with. So if you have a clean time that is occurring between now and next Tuesday, when we go to air at 5 p.m., send it over to me. Again, you can email it at matthew@cleanandfilthypodcast.com or send it right off of the website. Please send your first name and how much time you are celebrating so we can add you to the list and we can give you a shout out. So first and most importantly, because a newcomer is always the most important person, we've got Sarah as a newcomer. Well done. And we've got Lauren as a newcomer. Welcome back. Great job. Next up with 30 days, we got my boy Rhett from Vegas. Well done. And then also with 30 days clean, we've got James. Well done. And then with 90 days clean, we've got B. Well done. And then all the way from the East Coast with 1 year clean, we've got Pat. Well done, Pat. Then we've got Billy with 1 year clean. Yeah, Billy. Next up, we've got my tattoo artist himself, my boy Ryan with 2 years. Yeah. And then finally, we've got my old sponsor from Vegas with 18 years, Kevin B. Yeah, that's what we do out here. We get them bups for each year. So shout out to everybody who picked up clean time. If you didn't pick up any clean time, that's okay. Don't use, and guess what? You will. That's how this program works. So make sure, if you want to get a shout out, send it over to me so we can give you a shout out. I love giving clean time shout outs. It gets me hype. And then it's cool because then we get to go into the outro and I get to hear one of my favorite songs and I get even more hype. Yeah. So thank you everybody for a great episode. Episode 12. We are officially through the 12 steps. How crazy is that, yo? How crazy is that? But thank you, everybody, for being here. I love each and every one of you. If nobody's told you that today, that they love you, I love you. Thank you for being a part of my recovery, and thank you for all the support. Again, huge thank you to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. Huge thank you to our episode theme music, Anything by Valentino Khan and Alice in Wonderland. Thank you, Mad Decent Records, for allowing us to use it. Please make sure if you heard something you like, share it with somebody. Like, comment, share, subscribe, tweet, retweet, all that. All the social media on the website. So check it all out. And I will see each and every one of you next week, 5 p.m. right here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Love you guys.